The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. We're going to start with the Salon article. Progressive activists call for mass nonviolent civil disobedience if DNC rigs nomination. The DNC appears ready to engage in new and improved rigging methods. We can't allow that. By Shelley Williams, Phil Atito, Eleanor Goldfield, Nick Branya, Caitlin Sopochi Belknap. We could have voluntarily decided that, look, we're going to go into back rooms like they used to and smoke cigars and pick the candidate that way. That was the response from the DNC's lawyer, Bruce V. Spiva, when asked by the U.S. District Court in Fort Lauderdale in 2017 whether or not the Democratic National Committee had any legal obligation to run a fair primary. Verbatim, Spiva went on to claim that this wasn't how they ran the 2016 primaries, but again, they reserved the right to. Of course, that is how the DNC ran the 2016 primary, give or take some cigars. Indeed, even Donna Brazile, former chair of the DNC, admitted as much. Still, despite considerable protests in Philadelphia, the Democratic Party soldiered on and guilted Bernie Sanders into stumping for the second most unpopular candidate in the history of U.S. presidential elections, second only behind Trump. We, of course, know what happened next. Now, as we stare down the barrel of 2020, we can see a DNC ready to engage in new and improved rigging methods, or even just toss out the primary elections altogether, as 84 of 93 superdelegates interviewed this week by the New York Times are entertaining. Indeed, just look at the recent Iowa caucus app fiasco, or how Bloomberg is hiring superdelegates and state Democratic Party vice chairs to work for his campaign. Now, this article is a few days old, but I want to point out that those people Bloomberg hired are still probably poised to help rig the election, to help rig the nominating convention. And you can almost smell the greasy traces of 2016 polluting 2020 like a burst pipeline of corrupt, toxic sludge. Yes, as irony would have it, the leadership of the Democratic Party is tirelessly determined to show people just how undemocratic our elections really are. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? That, dear listeners and dear viewers, is the whole point of the Bernie or Bust television show. What should we do about it? But today I'm going to offer Bernie Sanders some advice as well. I'll hold that for the end of the show. But that is the principal question, the central question, the existential question. What do we Bernie bros and sisters do about the rigging? So hold that thought. If we accept that our democracy is already broken beyond repair and that the Democratic Party leadership is already putting into motion an organized scheme to overthrow our demands and undermine our electoral rights, what is our response? Put simply, burn the DNC. Hashtag burn the DNC with an E for burn if you're listening and not watching this. Ultimately, the Democratic Party leadership fears the Sanders presidential campaign because they fear us. They fear a candidate who not only speaks to the needs of the people, but who also lays bare so much corruption and injustice. They fear what a candidate like Bernie can excite in a nation long ago bored and angered by the status quo. They fear the largest and most organized working class movement this country has seen in our lifetimes. They fear all of this more than they fear 4 more years of Trump. That is why, if we have to, and make no mistake, we have to, we are committed to metaphorically burn the DNC. I don't know about metaphorically, but let's see what else they say here. Our goal is twofold: to make it clear to the Democratic establishment that we know their game and we aren't going to play this time. Our voices will be heard and our will cannot be ignored. Think of it as an insurance plan against the shitstorm of corruption that is already raining down on us and is only going to get worse as Bernie's campaign and this movement continues to clench primary after primary despite everything that the billionaires, nonprofit industrial complex lackeys, corporate media pundits, and the Democratic Party elites and their underlings are doing to undermine us. Well, that, dear listeners and viewers, we're not so sure about right now. It looks like a number of boomers listen to corporate media and they just leap to do their bidding. Super Tuesday, speaking of shitstorms, was a shitstorm of all shitstorms. So we have some problems here that we need to solve in a way that this article is going to outline. The problem is even worse than we originally thought. and we're going to have to face this existential threat with existential tactics. But we all know that you can't always count on insurance to save you. So the second prong of our pitchfork is this. If you try to steal this primary again, the actions we take will be swift, widespread, organized, and resolute. We will non-violently but definitively shut down the convention in Milwaukee and Democratic Party headquarters across the nation. All of the broken promises, the mirage democracy, the faux hope and change, the betrayals, all of these will fuel our response. And in that way, this goes way beyond Bernie. It's quite literally for everyone. Everyone who is sick and tired of living under an oligarchy that refuses to raise our wages, refuses to understand healthcare as a human right, busts our unions, buys off our political leaders, refuses to meaningfully fight Trump and the fascists he works with, incarcerates us like no other country in the world, and is bleeding the planet dry. All of us who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. There can be no progress on any issue if we don't insist on a basic foundation of self-determination and a democracy of, for, and by the people. The Democratic Convention in July is the moment to highlight that fact, the moment to meet, to activate that shared solidarity in the spotlight of the DNC's self-adulation at the expense of all the rest of us. From word of mouth alone, over the last 2 weeks, over 500 people have already signed up and have committed to nonviolent civil disobedience if they rig our primary and try to stop our movement. You can join us at burnthednc.org. We aren't trying to reinvent the activist wheel, but rather bring existing wheels together. Let's roll. Shelley Williams, Phil Atito, Eleanor Goldfield, Nick Branya, Caitlin Sapochi Belknap. Yesterday's show, which you can see here, episode 245, The Empire Strikes Back, I'm trying to make the argument that we need to do something drastic to get things turned around after Super Tuesday. In yesterday's show, I argued that we can either have fascism now or fascism later. If we vote for Biden and we get Biden, which we can't do because of the Bernie or bust movement. But if we were to get Biden, we would just postpone the inevitable, and we'd have President Nugent instead of President Trump when it's all over. So 4 more years of Trump and then 8 more years of Nugent, and then the planet's gone, and what do we have left but to kiss our asses goodbye and then try to explain to our children and grandchildren why they won't have an inhabitable planet. And then to explain to future generations of workers that they're going to continue to have a much smaller and smaller piece of the pie. So if you didn't see it, make sure to view yesterday's show or listen to it on podcast. I'm going to show you portions of Crystal and Cigar, Warren still aggrieved about mean Bernie bros. My Twitter account was suspended permanently because I was tweeting things directly to Elizabeth about her waffling on Medicare for All and other problems that she has. And so her fascistic response was to get Twitter to suspend my account. The timing was clearly related to the tweets that I tweeted about Elizabeth, and it wasn't being tweeted at anybody else. It was Elizabeth who took down my Twitter account. And that's how Elizabeth deals with dissenting voices. She has no respect for the First Amendment. Let me just play you a little bit of her response.
The Bernie Bros thing, let's take a listen.
Has the time come for us to just start trying to think more creatively about how to do this? You know, do you set up something, for example, from the campaign that every single day answers back to this with the authority of that person's campaign and says, we're not doing this. I'm flagging these. We don't like this. We don't want this. We don't want any part of this. We condemn it. How many times do I have to say this? You know, I want to say it's let's work on doing this creatively.
Oh my God, this drives me insane. Again, an Elizabeth Warren supporter wrote me a letter, nice letter, in which she called me a patriarchal racist because of my Indian heritage. Did I call on Elizabeth Warren?
When is Elizabeth Warren going to take responsibility?
Apologize.
So the end of this clip is advice for Bernie and how he should probably do more to unleash the Bernie bros, because we're facing an existential threat from the DNC and their rigging. And this is the answer from Crystal and Cigar.
If you're going to be the anti-establishment candidate, and if it really is existential for the working class people in this country and the priorities that you want to fight for, you have to be willing to go down that road. So you're exactly right. He understands that when it comes to, okay, once we're in office and we're fighting for Medicare for all and we're fighting for the Green New Deal, I will weaponize that movement and come to your district and mount a primary challenge. We will do what we have to do to get our allies and have our way. But he doesn't understand that when it comes to winning the election. He doesn't get that, Medicare for all is never going to happen if you don't win the election first. This is the moment that is so existential. And so, going back to the original point, when you demoralize basically your supporter base, when you castigate them, when you say this is disgusting, when you accept the media framing of this whole stupid Bernie Bros narrative, you are ceding that battleground. You are bowing before. That is reality of what's happening.
Just wondering, Crystal, you sound dangerously close to saying that we should unleash the Bernie or Bust movement. I would love to hear you and Cigar come on the show and say, okay, we're facing an existential threat. It's time to unleash the Bernie or Bust movement. We need Bernie to say, hey, Joe Biden, hey, David Brock, hey, Hillary Clinton, hey, Hollywood, and on and on. If you don't allow the people to speak in your nominating process, you can kiss your party goodbye. We're not going to vote for Joe Biden in the general election. We're going to vote Green Party. We're going to leave that line blank on the ballot. We're going to vote down ballot, but we're going to leave the president line blank. Or we're going to vote, some are going to vote directly for Trump. And so we're going to blow your party to smithereens. You're going to lose everything. And yes, we're playing hardball. That's how the game is played. And these are the times for hardball. We're facing an existential threat. Workers have been suffering for more than 40 years. It's time to play hardball and fix this. I'd love to hear Crystal and Cigar say, it's time to play hardball, folks. We all need to take the Bernie or Bust pledge, bernieorbust2020.us. And then we'll see some results. So they're criticizing Bernie for not playing hardball. I think they should also look at themselves. I think David Dole should look at himself, and Kyle Kulinski, and Jimmy Dore, and Cenk Uygur, and all the other professional sheepdogs who won't come out and say Bernie or Bust is the answer. They won't even warn us about the Bernie or Trump voters in swing states in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, who are poised and ready to give Trump another 4 years if we try to elect a corporatist like Joe Biden. We can't nominate Joe Biden. We just can't. He's going to lose, and the Bernie or Bust / Bernie or Trump voters will guarantee it. Biden is going to lose. It's a foregone conclusion. So if you're not willing to come out and say Bernie or Bust is the way to go, people, at least warn the people, warn the boomers who only get their news from corporate news, warn them that the Bernie or Trump voters in swing states are going to ensure that Trump wins again if Biden is the nominee.
Now, on the other hand, I think this argument that, well, first of all, this idea that Elizabeth Warren would be justified in not endorsing Bernie because his supporters have been so mean to her is one of the most pathetic things I've ever heard.
Yeah, no, it is.
Like, oh, suddenly I don't believe in healthcare for all because someone sent me a snake emoji.
Yeah.
Like, can you think of something more childish and petulant?
Yeah, he tweeted something like that yesterday. He's like, I don't believe in imperialism and I want everybody to be healthcare, but somebody's tweeted something at me now, so now somebody's tweeted something mean at me, so now I'm with Joe.
Yeah, exactly. No, but people, and look, regular voters out there who feel hurt by the tenor or the tone, right. Whatever, that's fine. But you're a leader. Yeah. You're supposed to actually stand and be ready to, your whole thing is fight hard, right? But apparently that fighting hard doesn't account for some people sent me a snake emoji.
Fight the power.
Right, okay. Exactly. All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.
So my plea to Bernie Sanders is that he will just make little gestures, little quiet gestures. He said something to Hillary's team last time, not to listen to him. He did these vain gestures in swing states for Hillary. He went out and stumped for Hillary. He told us to vote for Hillary. That was galling, I have to say. He'll probably have to do that again when they cheat him and give it to Joe. But what he should know is that he could have stopped all that. He could have just gently, quietly mentioned that perhaps some of his supporters, some of these mean Bernie bros and sisters, just might, maybe, just maybe, not vote for Joe Biden in the general election if they cheat Bernie. He could just quietly mention that, and all hell would break loose. Everything would come unglued. you would see the DNC fight back tooth and toenail. But this is an existential moment, and this is what we need to do. So Bernie, we're here. We're ready. We want to fight for you. And all you have to do is unleash us. All you have to do is just give us a little nod and say to your detractors, look, these Bernie bros and sisters, some of them are a little bit annoying, and some of them are just plain mean. There may even be some bad apples in that barrel, but regardless, a large portion of the Bernie brothers and sisters are not prepared to vote for Joe Biden in the general election, and I thought you should know that. And a lot of them are prepared to wade into the streets. A lot of them have their reservations already in Milwaukee, their hotel reservations, and they're ready to go. They're ready to pile into the streets and say, enough is enough. We're Bernie or bust. You're going to try to squash that news. It won't show up on corporate media, but they're there. They're ready to go. But most of all, what you really need to know is that a lot of my supporters are not going to vote for Joe Biden in the general election, and some are poised to vote directly for Donald Trump. Just saying. I think you could do that, Bernie. I think you could say that. I don't think it would end your campaign. I think it would just jumpstart it. You've got Dr. Cornel West out there inspiring people in Detroit. You've got people like Nina fighting tooth and toenail for your agenda. The least you could do for them and for the rest of us is just say, look, my supporters are sticky. They're not all going to vote for your candidate in the general election. You just need to face that. That's all you need to do, and we'll do the rest. Here's hoping.
Get on board the Bernie or bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernie or bust train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.